Hello everybody, welcome to Debate Hub. I am Chesh, your master debater, and I am here with Sly. I'm so excited to have Sly here.
Greetings and salutations, and go Panthers.
Panther, for anybody who doesn't know, I'm in the Toronto area, and we've got one Florida Panther fan over here, and Panthers versus the Toronto Maple Leafs is currently going on in the Stanley Cup Finals.
Oh,
Well, it's
no,
not,
no,
sorry,
no,
finals.
no, 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 no,
Hmm?
no, no. We wiped you out.
Oh, did you finish it? I only saw the
Yes,
one
ma'am.
where Toronto. I saw the one not last Saturday, the Saturday before, so I hadn't caught up yet.
hmm
Oh, we
Oh
lost.
no,
Boo! Surprise
we
to surprise to
and
nobody.
in it was a good fight though. It was a 7-game series. It wasn't a wipe, and
Yeah,
yeah. So I figured I'd chest up a little bit.
yeah. Do it up, do it up, do it up. If anything, if there's anything the Toronto Maple Leafs fans know how to do, it's lose.
Man, you know what? I
Every time.
felt so bad for the team because
Mm.
as soon as it started looking like they were going to lose, the mass exodus of fans out of the stadium, I was just like, man, that is so wrong. I mean, I'm a born New Yorker. I see New York Giants fans when they leave, and I think that's messed up. But watching these hockey fans, oh man, they were just rough.
Listen, if it makes you feel any better, don't watch it when it's Montreal. The Montreal
Well, I mean,
Canadiens are
I mean,
prone to riots.
yeah. Well, last year we had to compete against another Canadian team, Edmonton,
Ah,
and
yes.
and we barely won that.
Yep.
So I'll
Yep.
just say respect on that side.
Huzzah!
Huzzah! So what are we talking about today?
Today we are talking. You have been on before this was Debate Hub. You had come over to my channel and talked with Bearded Heretic and
Okay.
Godless Scummer. And while we
Okay.
were having that conversation, you brought up your entire like deconversion story from going from religious to non-religious and your time in the military.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
I didn't feel like that story and that whole thing got its fair shake because it was part and squished in between other conversation and the chat was busy arguing about what a triangle is.
That never happens. What are you talking about?
Oh my god. I was
But
watching them and I'm like, what are you doing?
hmm.
So I wanted to bring you back on and kind of discuss and maybe dive into it a little bit harder with your consent,
Hmm.
of course. And
Of
another time
course.
we're gonna have to come back and talk politics.
Yeah, nah. We'll wait about 3.5 more years on that one. The at the
Mhm.
at America's rebirth. But,
They will
oh,
be cleansed in the
that
blood.
that better just be coffee, young lady.
It's tea.
Ah, okay, good. That'll
And
work.
only tea for once.
Uh huh. Because I see the little bottles and stuff like that behind you. So
These are spices.
those are spices.
Yeah, these are
Oh,
all
I thought those
different.
were like shot bottles.
No. They're all. There are like tequila. There is a tequila one in here, but none of these are actually alcoholic. They are
Right.
all. They are all just different levels and layers of spicy nonsense.
Yeah. No, my what do you call it? I am drinking garden mint water. So
What does that mean? Is that the brand?
no. The brand is a company called Instick, and I have one of those water purifiers in the kitchen,
Oh,
and and I buy these little powders. They call them sticks that you normally pour into like bottled water or
oh
something.
yeah.
And this particular and so I just so I'm not just like boring ass water and and I mean because I drink a lot of liquids.
Mhm.
That's a subject from the military, but I drink a lot of liquids, and so obviously water being the best choice for that. The uh, yeah, just the flavor I have in there right now. It's you can't see it in here, but it's a very pale green, and
Ooh.
and it tastes really good. It tastes like a virgin mojito. Let's just say it now.
Nice.
It,
All
yeah.
right. So why don't we start with well, who are you? First off.
I am Sly Sparkane.
And what is it you say you do here besides troll me
Eh,
about hockey games?
well, would I ever do such a thing? Come on now. It's even more fun when you're not really a hockey fan, you know. But no, born in New York, raised in South Florida, joined the military when I was 19, and been was in the military for just over 8 years, and then yeah, then went to work for as a contractor here in Germany, and then uh, then joined DoD, and yeah, been working ever since. I'm a strong supporter of my country. I'm a I guess you could say a functioning patriot as opposed to just a big mouth patriot. I actually support directly my troops um, with with all the support that I can give them on a professional level, and without going too deep into that.
All seems fair and reasonable.
Mm,
And I
pays
think
good too.
if there was ever a time that I think Americans needed to support each other, now is a good time to be doing that. Um,
It's an amazing time. Yeah.
yeah. So tell us a little bit about your time in the military, or at least like where you started, because a lot of this is a deconversion from religion to non. Um,
Hmm.
and I believe you're still in the non category.
As in non-religious,
Yes.
yes, that is 100% accurate.
Yeah. So
The
where did you start off from? You gonna walk us through this a little bit.
well, I mean, in New York, um, we used to attend a little church called St. Peter's Church, which is actually half church, half gymnasium.
Oh yes.
Um, and I had two very good pastors, Father Peter, Father Cody, and my parents and a another family were actually the choir for the church, um, but not a choir as in standing there in robes and reading from things. This was a little bit more hippie style, I guess, because my father and the father and the other family they played guitar, and so it was a little bit more kumbaya type,
Von Trapp
and
family.
yeah, and a little bit of Partridge Family going on there, and the and yeah, and my mom and the wife on the other side, and then everybody else. It was that was the choir of the church, and we had a great time. I mean, it became. I mean, I went to Sunday school and all that other stuff, but I also had what do you call it? I had pastors who were down to earth. They were not like they gave praise to God on everything, but they weren't the type of people who like every third word out of their mouth was God this, God that, and all this. And which I was very, I guess I never realized how fortunate I was on that, because there's a lot of ones that are just like really hardcore.
So did you have
But
a like specific denomination, or was this just a very
Catholic,
loose a Catholic? Okay. I
yeah,
mean, yeah, that
New
is
York,
unusual for like for a Catholic. Usually Catholics are
yeah,
pretty, especially American Catholic is usually pretty like
yeah. No, we were straight up Catholic, and but I never, you know, I'm going to say this, out of my own ignorance, I guess, but I never saw a difference between those things. We're all teaching out of the Bible, so I never saw anything that was pure Catholicism or anything like that, or any kind of disapproval from others. And but I mean, so I went to communion, and I've been baptized, and went through all that stuff, in the normal progression that a religious family goes through, and that stayed with us for, I would say, till I was about 10, and then we moved to Florida. Don't do that if you live in semi-rural New York. We moved to South Florida, very superficial, very fast paced, lots of money, and lots of fake people. And the at least where I was living, I we went to the at the time second richest city in America, Boca Raton. My father moved down there with IBM, and that was what caused the move. And my mom was never terribly thrilled with the idea of moving down to Florida, even though it was a nice little, shout out about, we live near beaches and sunshine, instead of living up in New York and Pennsylvania. And well,
Mm-hmm.
in a very sad turn of events, in the very opening months of us being in South Florida, my mother's mother came down to visit, and she was. I don't want to say that she was very old. I want to say that she was maybe in her 50s.
Ah,
Um,
yeah.
and she came down to visit, and we had a real great visit. And and there was a lot of running around, taking pictures of palm trees and going to the beach and all that stuff. Unfortunately, when she flew back, as I understand the scenario, on the airplane, she had an aneurysm,
Oh.
um, and which threw her directly into the hospital, and she was on life support and all kinds of other things. I'm not going to pretend to know all the details of that.
Right.
I just remember that it was extremely emotional time in our family, and my mother got on a plane, flew up there, and obviously my grandmother then passed away shortly after that. And my mother was very close to her mother, because her father, my grandfather, was 35 years United States Army. He's a little bit more of a rock and stuff like that, and a little bit more disciplinarian. A little bit. I'll give him a little bit of asshole. Um,
And what he would have been in the military during like
he was
Vietnam.
he was well, no, he was in the military for World War II,
Mhm.
Korea, um, and I think in the very beginnings of Vietnam, and
Just for a
before
little
he got out.
context for anybody out there that's not sure on the timeline
Yeah,
for what that would
and
have looked like.
don't get me wrong. He earned his way. He was respected, but he was also, like I said, he was a bit of a disciplinarian, and kind of the the typical patriarch. And the but the problem is that here we are in South Florida, and now my grandmother dies, my mother's mother dies, and even though we were starting to go to church in South Florida, obviously when we moved down there, because that was something to keep going in the family, I guess. Um, it became very difficult for my mother to sit in the church
Lost her
because
support
of,
system.
well, she lost her support system, but at the same time, the it was very difficult for her to get over the vision of the funeral, um, being in a church, obviously, and she had a very very difficult time with that, and so that kind of led to a slow bleeding off of going to church on a regular basis. Um, Mix that with, like I said, the influences of superficial ass South Florida, and my her father lived down in South Florida, and so there was that, and so it was things changed. There was a categoric shift in the family as far as church was concerned, and but I mean, I never, I guess, should I say, lost faith or whatever. But to be 100% honest with you, I never really was sure that I had it. Um, the I
Is
grew
that
up
like
with,
in retrospect or like at the time you weren't sure?
I would say in retrospect,
Mm.
because the growing up with ADD, um, I found that there's a lot of things that I did just by going through the motions, doing what I was supposed to be doing, because that's how people with ADD cope with the world around them, is to mimic
Masking.
what's going on with them.
Yep.
And, but like I said, we peeled off of going to church. And then a couple of years went by. We basically weren't going to church anymore.
And how old
But
were
I
you
never really,
during the move?
Well, when we moved, I was about 10.
All right.
So that, like I said, that's where a lot of things that, when I was 10, that was where a lot of things shifted. And then, things just kind of faded, in a gradient, to other things. And then fast forward probably about 9 years later, and I joined the military. And never really, I did have myself at agnostic at that point, just because of
Um,
the fact of the amount of time that I wasn't, well, agnostic under the possibly false definition of not sure.
sure. Yeah, yeah. Out of
And
curiosity, and just for like a little bit of clarification, you while you were growing up, did you or did you not know you had ADHD or ADD? Sorry, is that something that you found
it
out
didn't have a
later?
title then.
It didn't have a title. Did you know you had something, or you just weren't diagnosed with anything?
I'll say it to you this way:
Mm.
people who have something don't know they have it. Um, the Especially when it affects your very persona. Um, the But my parents were having a difficult time with it,
Okay.
and the so
So you
going
got
through
the new
that,
lens perspective as you got older. When you
yeah.
were diagnosed, you were able to reassess.
Well, see, that's the whole thing. I was never, at least at that point, I was never diagnosed.
Right.
I didn't get a title to it till much later, and everything else by that time was learning deficient, brain damaged, inattentive, drug addict. I mean, all the things that you could possibly throw at what the hell's wrong with it. And so that yeah, that didn't exactly fill me with a lot of confidence when I entered the world. And so I went into the military after the I should say the summation of a lot of bad decisions. Um, the And those bad decisions kind of being the result of being thrown into the world unprepared, because I spent a lot of my life being fixed, and and plus, no religion, no faith, no anything like that. So I was just like, joining the military was probably the best thing that could have happened to me. And otherwise,
A lot of
I don't know where
structure.
I'd be right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, structure. You didn't have to think about life as much. When you're in the military, you don't have to think about life as much. You don't have to think about where's my next meal coming from. Am I going to have a job tomorrow? And all this. Everything else is
Degree
kind
of
of taken care of,
stability.
and it allows you to live. You know, and yeah, going through that. I was in the military for a good little while before my very first deployment. My first deployment was in early '97, and that was when we went to Bosnia. And Bosnia and Kosovo. Kosovo was the deployment after that. Those two things changed my life, changed everything about my life. Now I was doing a lot of self assessment and also self improvement in the first handful of years being in the military.
It sounds like the
Um,
military sort of gave you the mental freedom to do a lot of reassessment and kind of looking at yourself because you didn't have to
well,
be
yeah,
worried about.
because you're not worried about other things, and you don't
Yeah.
have to impress the world. And
You don't have to
the
try to fit in the same way. You have like a very
right,
strict, this is what you're supposed to be doing, this is what we're telling you to do. You don't really
yeah,
have to
yeah.
think about it, you just
The
do it.
lines are pretty clear.
Yeah.
Yeah, and but going through that, the first deployment was to Bosnia. And by the way, me as a veteran, I can say I've never been to Iraq, never went to Afghanistan or anything like that. I was fortunate enough not to be part of that, even though I wanted to be part of that. But it seems like every unit I went to just got back from there, and it was just like, I guess I'm not going to get deployed because
What are the
what you
odds?
what you end up wanting is you want a deployment patch on your uniform because everybody else got a deployment patch on the uniform. And if you don't have one, or if you just have an American flag there, yeah, you get kind of looked at, as being a lesser soldier.
Why didn't
And
you go? You're just
yeah,
like, I don't know, management.
but then next thing we knew, I went to two deployments right behind each other, and like I said, one of them, the first one was being in Bosnia, and the second one was Kosovo, and both of those things um, changed my life just from the experiences that I went through there. And one of the things that I remember the day that I became, or I admitted to myself that I was atheist, um, because that is part of this. You know, you have to. Oddly enough, I think it was Richard Dawkins who said, he said, somehow we live in a society where it's okay to, where it's normal to believe in something imaginary, and it's not normal not to. And and I thought that was that's a pretty profound statement if you think about it. But but I was on Hilltop 722 in Srebrenik, Bosnia, and one of the things that we used to get all the time while we are up there, we always got these printouts of these, their news briefs and stuff like that, letting us know what's going on in the region, so we are informed of, the greater picture. And where we used to keep them, one of the places that we used to keep them, we'd keep them in the DFAC in the chow hall there, and we would also keep them up in. There was two guard posts that we had, literal guard posts, and and I remember being up in that guard post, and I was talking with the other soldier that was there, and we were reading some of the stories of things that were found, things that have gone right, things that have gone wrong, and all of them also had each brief tended to have some little historical story or explanation of something that had gone on in the region, just so you have that kind
Some
of
tidbit, a little bit of context.
some kind of educated picture of what was going on. And whether it was fed to us or whatever, it doesn't matter. The stories themselves were factual.
Were
Um,
you? This is Bosnia at the time. Were you working with any other country military at the time, or was this like an exclusively American
at that location, the Danish.
Oh, okay.
We had Danish soldiers up there, and we loved to hang out with them because they had beer, and the but I mean we were a if you ever look it up online, Hilltop 722, it was this small little tent city
Mhm.
with two guard posts and communications. We were was a communication station and a satellite station, and but when we were there, um, yeah, we were there with the Danes, and they drank Tuborg beer, and which we weren't allowed to have, but of course you get one afternoon, and I'm just bringing I'm bringing the guys on shift some food or something like that,
Just
and then
dropping
you
something
end up staying
off.
back
Just
there.
running an errand.
Yeah, and
You're not supposed to
but
bring food into the movie theater either.
yeah, how dare you? And the but going through all that, yeah, in Bosnia, until I left the hill, which I didn't want to do. It was because somebody else got promoted, and they put him up there, and he fucked everything up. But anyway, I won't go into that.
Ain't that always the
Um,
way?
yeah, and but while we were up on the hill, I mean, down at Tuzla, there was a lot of different nationalities. I remember there were Germans there. I remember there were obviously the American forces. Um, there was a couple of them. I'm not going to pretend I paid very much attention to it because I was pissed off that I had to go back down to Tuzla,
Yeah, well, it's fair.
and,
It's all fair.
and because I wanted to stay up on that hilltop. That hilltop was great, and but we stayed there, and like I said, I'm reading through these scenarios, and you got to understand there's a lot of pictures that have to be painted in your mind while you're in these places, and it's the shit you don't hear about on the news. But they want to let you know because it's obviously something that could affect your life while you're
It's
there,
relevant, yeah.
and things like what do you call it? Last week, a family was found burnt alive, and all this, and
Local
it
news.
appears that the females in the family were raped while it happened. or before it happened,
I
etc.
was gonna say,
Uh,
well, it happened. That's
yeah,
balls. Goddamn.
but the and there's also another image that I remember when we were actually rolling into when we were actually rolling in, we we go over the Sawa River and or Sava River, and there, and we got somebody who's telling us all this stuff about what's going on around us and stuff like that, and they say, you see this neighborhood over here, it all looks peaceful like something you would see in any other European town and all this, but everywhere there's booby traps, landmines, and all this, because that is like the landmine capital of the world. And as far as the whole Balkans war and the zone of separation and all the other crap. And the first vision that I had actually rolling into that country was, I'm looking at these houses as we're rolling by, and they're probably about, I don't know, 200-300 meters away, and I saw this one of the because this was ethnic cleansing, so it's not like it was a war that somebody blew out towns and stuff like that. This was go get them, you know and you would see like nice house with no windows, the roof is burnt off. Nice house with no windows, the garage door was blown out. It was a
It's
really
targeted.
weird.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was really weird. And one of the houses that had no windows on it, it was pretty sunny when we were rolling in. And as we're rolling in, I it caught my eye that one of the removed window type houses, uh, the room inside was pink. Right now, pink only means one thing in that scenario, and that usually means it's a girl's room. And so as we're rolling by, and you can kind of scan the room through the window, you got about halfway through, and then you started seeing bullet holes, you know and that hits you when you actually see that. It's one thing to describe it and say, oh wow, that must be terrible and all this, but when you actually see that, there's a little click that goes off in your mind, and you're just like, if there's one
It's
place on this
real.
planet that a bunch of bullet holes do not belong, is on a pink wall in a family home. you know
Right.
and so I had that, and various other things like that were influencing me as far as how fucked up the things were that happened there.
Right.
And but then, like I said, we're reading these stories in these briefs that we got, and we're hearing things like family burned alive, uh, landmines put under the back of cars and stuff like that. So when somebody actually loaded up their family and rolled out of the driveway, that the whole family would get blown up. And I mean, it was just horrible shit. And then, of course, there's also the more famous stories, like commuter buses being pulled off the road by these troops, and people were singled out of the bus, brought outside, and beaten to death. Not shot, not executed or something like that, but literally beaten to death.
Yeah.
And so you hear all these things. And I remember sitting there, and now here I was, soldier in a foreign country, obeying my superiors, all that whole concept. And I remember looking over at the other soldier there, and I was just like, man, you know what? It's bad enough that people were doing this, but could you imagine that there's a commander out there of each one of these, because we all know about our, superiors. There's a commander out there who
Yeah.
told them to go do that.
Yeah.
I
There's
was like, what
somebody
kind of
in
piece of
charge.
shit do
Yeah.
you have to be to say, go to this route, bus route, and kill all of the specific this group of people um, that are on that bus? And we're not talking about noble deaths. We're talking about men, women, elderly, children. Didn't matter as long as you fit that
Civilians for
category.
all
Yeah,
intents and purposes. Yeah.
all civilians.
Yeah.
And so I sat there and I had that, and something in my mind snapped when I made that very comment to my fellow soldier. about having a commander that was apparently cool with this. And I had said to myself, I mean, because there's a lot of examples of religious type wars and stuff, or wars based on religion. And I turned around and it just kind of snapped in my head. I was like, is God cool with this? You know, how could God be cool with this? And that was literally my thought process. I was like, how can God be cool with this
It's
and
a
all
very
this? And
visceral problem of evil.
yeah, and it's one of those, because if you read the Bible and stuff like that, back in the day, God was a gunslinger. I mean, God was, Lot's wife turned around once to look at a burning building. Come on, and got turned into into a pillar of salt. I mean, God took no prisoners back in the day and all
Yeah.
this. But now everything's kind of a little bit more like, well, you'll get yours on your judgment, and the and it's just like, really, is it, and that kind of mixing of thoughts turned into, well, I wouldn't, this isn't the God that I grew up with. You know, the God I grew up with wouldn't be cool with this shit. And but then you realize, well, this has to be the God that exists, and this God has to be in some way cool with this happening with his creation. And I I think in some way to protect what I was taught about God, I became atheist because associate I couldn't rationalize or associate the God that I grew up with being cool with the world how it is
Right.
and allowing these things to happen. I mean, you always hear about the specific individual incidents, this rape or this child murder and stuff like that. But on the scale that these things take place,
Right.
and you don't see, where's the fire and brimstone? You know, where's the,
God
whatever,
was
whatever,
intervening here on behalf of
right.
this, but not
Yeah.
intervening
So
here on
just
behalf
because
of
you wanted
that.
to level a city and you turn somebody's wife into stone, or you order some guy
Right.
who's gathering sticks on a specific day of the week to be stoned to death,
Right.
you know,
I mean,
and
you could
like I said,
also really go with the story of Jericho, the
mm-hmm,
chasing down the oh, brain. William Lane Craig talks about it all the time. It was a Palestinian genocide.
mm-hmm. And but going through all those things in my mind, uh, like I said, I think in order to protect that which I had learned about God, I I disassociated myself with religion in general and with a belief in a higher power at all. And the because I was just like, I did not want to bend what I was taught into this mold, which was completely different than what
You
I was taught.
valued what you were taught and
Right.
the beliefs that you grew up with more than you did the images that were being portrayed to you and the
Exactly.
rationality. And the answer was the Canaanites. Sorry, William Lane Craig has a whole thing about the defense of the Canaanites.
Yeah.
No,
I'm not going to pretend to be
that's okay.
all
I
the
just that was
detail
more for
oriented.
the audience, not
Yeah.
for you specifically. I just wanted to make sure that I got that correct and didn't mess people
Yeah.
up and send
No.
them off in the wrong direction.
But I just I couldn't I could no longer keep that association together. And literally that afternoon up in that guard tower was when I turned around and I said, "No, no, this is not true." And I came down from that tower an atheist, and not just came down from that tower an atheist, but I mean, there's a lot of people who fake the funk like they're religious and all this who actually are atheists or just don't really have their heart in it. Um, but they don't say anything due to they don't want you know they don't want to upset their families and they don't want
They don't want the
revenge against them. And
blowback, and
yeah,
yeah,
and but it was that moment that I decided that I don't care what somebody says, you know. And if somebody asks me if I'm not this, I'm not going to shy away from it. I'm going to say no, no, because I had my reason. It wasn't it wasn't just a lack of belief. It was I have a reason to think that this is bullshit. And the which I think is a little bit different. I mean, it's kind of like somebody saying that they don't like sushi, but they've never had it, and then
It's
you have
a
somebody who
very
says,
visceral, very practical. Though I've had this experience, I have seen
mm-hmm,
these things, and point A does not. You cannot have point A and point B at the same
mm-hmm.
time.
But oddly enough, I do believe in karma, but I think that's just more life working things out for you. But the
That's just cause and effect.
yeah, well, no, because one time when I was younger, I was driving down I-95 in South Florida, and I had my Volkswagen Jetta. That was my car, and I was driving in the rain, and living in Boca Raton and not being rich makes you love to hate rich people, because there's just so much just disgusting money there and all this. And don't get me wrong, if I was rich, I would live the same way. But I wouldn't be that type of person to people. And
Yeah, 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 yeah. The
and
arrogance.
but
Yeah.
but I remember rolling down I-95, and there was a dude with a Porsche in a nice suit with an umbrella because it was raining, trying to pull the spare tire out of the front boot of his car, and because that's where it is, and because he had a flat tire. And I remember I yelled out the window. I was like, fuck you, and all this other stuff. It was the love to hate the rich people. Not 10 miles later, the I had had a fender bender with this car at one point, with my car, and up front things were a little bit loose and stuff like that. But not 10 miles later, the hood on my Jetta flapped up straight and just pressed against the windshield,
Oh,
right?
damn.
I mean, and we're talking, now I'm, looking out the window while I'm driving because I'm on 95 doing about 60 miles an hour and all this. And now I can't see anything. And I'm in the middle of traffic and all this other shit. And I think that moment I also decided that karma is a real thing.
It's like, I shouldn't be a dick.
Yeah, yeah. Sometimes it's just not
Not
the
worth
right
it.
thing to do. And plus, there's also those times in life where
Yeah.
people give you shit and stuff like that. So I kind of let karma. I leave that one alone.
Let people work themselves out. Fair enough.
Mm-hmm.
So, you had a very, like, would you liken it in retrospect to if somebody claims to have had an interaction, like a very real interaction with some kind of supernatural, maybe deistic entity, where,
Mm-hmm.
like, for like example, I mean, there's examples of this in the Bible, but like if somebody in real life was like, no, 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 I had this come to Jesus moment where God spoke to me directly about, I don't know, I was drinking too much alcohol, and
Mm-hmm.
that turned my life around. Would you liken your experience to something that visceral of an example?
Well, that type of example, no, I would not liken it to that. Because these moments where people say that they've talked to Jesus, or Jesus got them out of something, or God got them out of something, or whatever the case was, um, are ignorant of the fact that dreams exist. And I mean that in the most positive way.
Yeah, I
And
mean, yeah, fair.
they're ignorant of the fact that the human mind has an imagination. Sometimes we can't rationalize everything, and sometimes shit works out because here's the other part, and I thought this was pointed out very well in the movie Bruce Almighty. Um, how many people ask God to win the lottery? And they might have completely beautiful reasons for it. My family needs surgery, or somebody in my family is dying, and we're not going to be able to afford a nice this, or I mean, there could be completely beautiful reasons, and there's also completely egotistical reasons, and and I thought that was an interesting corner to look at that from, and that is, you know, people only. It's kind of like cold reading, and the people only seem to focus on the parts that worked or the parts that seem to align with that story. You know,
Confirmation bias.
and
Yeah.
I mean, like we always talk about the you always see these documentaries of the person who got off the plane that later crashed,
Right.
and all this, and they thank God for that and stuff like that. It's like, yeah, but what did God do about all the rest of the people there who didn't want to
I
die?
guess they all deserve to die. I don't know.
Yeah, and
It's
so
part of the plan.
you if you are incapable of taking your personal victory out of the larger picture, then yeah, okay, fine. I got a book to sell you and make sure that put some money in the basket when they pass it around. The I don't I'm just I'm too practical of a person in
Well,
that
you're
sense.
what happened to you is very real, right? And
Mhm.
it's not, and anybody can experience that. Whereas, like, if you're
Mhm.
talking about divine revelation, which was sort of what I was getting at,
Mhm.
you can't share that. That's not something
Mhm.
that you can't experience that unless God lets you share that.
Mhm.
So yours, that's why I wouldn't liken them at the very least. But this isn't about me.
Mhm. No, but I mean, it's just that we always focus on the hits and we don't focus on the misses.
Right.
And the that's why I likened it to cold reading.
Yep.
Cold reading is the most insensitive and just horrible practice, of people making money off of dead people.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. You talk about like
the
psychics. Yeah.
they when they turn around and finally, if you fast forward to the end of a cold read and stuff like that, and you see somebody there in tears and, oh yes, I loved it very much, and we went fishing together when I was a kid and all this, but you don't but you only seem to concentrate on that and not the fact that the ghost didn't know its own name, you
Right.
know and the fishing that they had to do through the crowd to get to that one gullible person,
Yeah.
just
Well,
because
people
I
who are
mentioned that.
already there because they've been primed to show up to something like this in the first place.
Right. And so, that kind of shit, if you only focus on the hits,
Yeah.
then you're willing to fall for anything. And
Yeah.
so when you go through these experiences, whether they happen to you or you are witness to them,
Right.
um the if you fail to catalog those losses, the things where, in this particular case where, I'll bet you that family that got burned alive and stuff like that, I'm sure God's name was mentioned a couple of times. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But they still got burnt on their front lawn.
Right.
And the I'll bet you God's name was mentioned in that girl's room with the bullet holes in it. You
Yeah.
know, and so if you are incapable of actually rationalizing the failures, the misses, then I don't really care about your opinion of the hits.
You have to acknowledge these things. If you can't acknowledge all of them, then why
Hmm.
acknowledge any of them?
Right. And so I mean that's where I come down on that whole thing,
Mm.
because the I'm not going to talk about coincidences and stuff like that, but I let me enter one complaint.
But please, by all means.
One complaint about the faithful. Um, and I don't dog people who if they get something out of this, spiritually or whatever and stuff like that. Hey, all power, more power to you. Okay, I mean, really, I mean, I have no problem with that because I was raised that way.
Well, you're here to
And
share an experience, not tell people how to
yeah,
feel or what to think.
well, no, no, no. But what I'm saying is, I'm just meaning that in general. It's a
Yeah.
general principle of mine. But I get pissed off watching football when you know you're it's
Uh huh.
fourth and long You got,
Mm-hmm.
what do you call it? You only got one more attempt and all this before the fucking whistle blows. You got an incredible amount of distance before you can get to the end zone, and you're down by 6 points, or you're
Mm-hmm.
down by 5 points, or whatever the case is, And all you need is that one touchdown to win the game.
Mm-hmm.
And these athletes who play professional sports and stuff like that, they train every day. They go out, they run routes, they get these patterns down, pat, and and they refine their skills, their catching skills, their running skills, their throwing skills, their blocking skills, their dodging skills.
The amount of
All this.
money and effort and energy that
Yeah, I
goes
mean, these
into.
people just are conditioned machines.
Yeah.
Even though there's a person inside there, I mean, there's a reason why they get paid a couple $1,000,000.
Right.
You know, because in most cases, to a certain extent, they're worth that, as far as what they bring to the game. And but you turn around, that ball gets hiked, and the play is going on. It's not going to get blown. In football, it doesn't get blown when when the buzzer runs out. When the time runs out. That if that plays in motion, it goes until it's completed.
Right.
And you turn around, QB gets out there, ducks about two or three, tacklers, and sees his guy way down the field, throws a Hail Mary pass. That thing goes, just arcs so beautifully. The whole place is quiet because the ball is going down there. Dude catches the ball 2-3 steps later, gets into the end zone, and then turns around and goes like this. And it's like, do you not realize all the things that brought you to that point? It's not like you woke up one morning, found yourself on a football field, and somebody threw you a ball.
Yeah. It to me
I,
it's
I, I
one of
have I have a
those.
problem with that.
Do religious people not find that offensive? Like with everything going on and how
Oh,
great God is, you think like do you not would you not be offended that like yeah, your God's getting called out to the football game? Meanwhile, X, Y, and Z is happening not even just
yeah.
you don't even have to
Meanwhile,
go
your
around the
your
world, you just
your
go into your
father's on life
backyard.
support. Yeah, your father's
Yeah.
on life support, and all this. But hey, God took a minute out so I can catch that football. You know.
Right. It see it,
Mm,
it feels offensive to me. It feels
yeah.
offensive to I'm not a religious person though, so I mean maybe I'm just missing maybe it's just a me thing, but I like that
Well, I guess
cringe.
they never look at it that way,
Maybe.
because most of the people that I've seen in celebration of said touchdown and said point to the sky and all this, they kind of I've seen people take it more. The majority of people take it more as he's one of us,
Right.
and of course God made that possible.
It feels validating
You
to
know,
have somebody in a position like in a revered position believe the same
yeah,
thing that
it's
you do.
it's it's rough, man. It's rough to watch that.
That's fair.
And at least for me personally, or at least me being atheist, I just ignore it. It's like, all right, well, if you want to do that, that's fine. But
Yeah.
you know,
And
you know, you know that your years of training is what caught you that football. You
yeah.
know.
And it'd be offensive if God was intervening. It might even be considered
Mhm.
cheating. On the other hand, though, like, so this was how long ago that you had your experience and converted? Was there like, was it pretty instant, or did you have like a
It
sort
was
of
instant.
a debrief for
No,
yourself?
no, it was instant. The I because that animal instinct is interesting. Because animal instinct doesn't take time to figure shit out.
Yeah. Okay. Fair. Yeah. Yeah.
You know, so once it clicks, whatever direction you're going with that click, that's where it goes. You know, you don't all this other rationalizing it and having to talk it out with somebody and stuff like that. It's that's more man-made fluff.
That's
You know,
you adapting consciously,
or,
not
or
the
no,
decision.
actually, I think that's you more building a story that you would have to tell other people.
Oh, okay. You think it's a
And
social?
what do you call it? Yeah, because the because if you were let's say you was out standing on the street right now, and Some dude came running at you with a knife.
Me outside, disgusting.
But you're standing
Yeah,
outside and some dude comes running at you with a knife.
right.
Are you going to rationalize that situation? Or are you going to
Yeah,
hit him with or are you going to hit him with the trash can?
yeah. It's the
You know?
rationalization comes after the fact. Yeah.
Yeah, you can talk about it to your lips go blue and all this, but the
You're gonna do what you're
the
gonna
key point
do.
is you
Yeah.
yeah, instinct hits because the brain is actually very good at making very fast decisions.
Yes.
And we're not the fastest by far, but fast enough. And so when you, as long as you are not, as long as you don't fear that your decision has to fit something, in other words, as long as you're true to yourself and to your decisions, um, those decisions happen instantly. Now, can you go back? Sure. And I mean, can something switch that switch back? Sure. And all this, but because again, the instinct when the instinct hits you, it you might find yourself going back. Um, but I have not found a rational reason to do so, and the and I've seen a lot
Because
of
now
shit
you'd have
before.
to. You're dealing with two instinct reactions that you then have to pit against each other. At that point,
Yeah,
then you're starting to
and
rationalize and
because
picking one over the
it
other.
it, it turns into a Ricky Ricardo moment, where you say that somebody's got some splaining to do,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
the kind of like on the whole flat Earth scene.
Mm.
I mean, I'll just interject that just a little bit.
Please do,
Um,
by all means.
I don't I keep on telling flat earthers, prove it to me. You
Mm.
know, show me your evidence. Now, there is a short list of things that I would accept as raising an eyebrow about the globe, and the but obviously I haven't been shown any of those. And now, if somebody were to produce those in a manner that I consider to be at least honest um,
Real.
and comprehensive enough
Mm.
that I would accept the results that they were showing me. That's only half the step,
Right.
because you'd be like, all right, like that, but then you're just like, yeah, but what about these 500 other things that I've done?
Now we have to figure out
You
what's
know,
going on
now we got
between.
to figure out how this all
We have
fits
competing
and all this.
information. Yeah.
Whereas beliefs are different. Belief, you can turn a belief on a dime. Because a belief is nothing more than your personal truth about the world around you. And the so you can literally turn a belief on a dime, and that's what happened with me. Is when, because it's not like it has to fit
You're
something
not
else that
doing an
happened, because it's all
experiment.
a story.
Right.
Yeah,
You're separating out experimentation
yeah,
versus experience. Yeah.
right. And subjective things, they can change all the time. Objective things, they can't. And
You can change
but
your
if we're
perspective.
talking
Yeah.
about a belief, if we're talking about a belief, then that can change. It can turn on a dime. And and I literally, this was like the last 5 minutes of my time, my guard duty time, and I walked out of there and not even apologetic about it. I didn't even feel uncomfortable about it, and I was just like, yeah, no, it no longer makes sense to me. I've reached the end of this particular road, and just snapped like that. And it did introduce a couple of interesting conversations, because
Yeah.
there are a lot of military faithful, and they will gladly tell you, I do this for God and all this other stuff and whatever. And but yeah, as long as the reason why you either do or do not believe in God makes sense to you, not makes sense to somebody else, but as long as it makes sense to you, then
Yeah.
you can sit there and be comfortable with it. And mine made sense to me. I was like, this is not the God that I was taught about. you know and
Yeah.
it made perfect sense to me in that moment when I thought about the people who had died around me. And there was one other thing that happened later. Um, Obviously, I had already been atheist for at least a year at that point.
Hmm.
But then we were deployed to Kosovo, and the and I accidentally, well, not accidentally, somebody else had it planned out, but I accidentally ended up pulling guard duty on the Macedonia border, and I'll just say that there was Macedonia did not allow people from Kosovo to drive into their country, but the refugee camp was in Macedonia, or at least this one particular refugee camp. So people who wanted to, now that the American forces were there, or at least the NATO forces were there, the people were choosing to leave the refugee camp and go and try and make a life back at home. And it's a long walk. I'll just say it that way. It was probably about 12 miles, and in the middle of Kosovar summer, and it's fucking hot. And
I would melt as a
yeah,
Canadian.
and when you have somebody who has gone through as much as they have, uh, and you have one of them come up to you, you're nobody. I mean, as far as this is concerned, you're just another uniform there. And but when you have one of them come up to you, a complete stranger, both to you and to them, um, and they come up to you in English and say thank you, that also changes your idea of who was really helping here. You know what I mean? I'm sure there was a lot of praying to God and stuff like that on the, when they left, the refugee camp to head out and all this. But for them to come around the corner and see themselves or feel safe because we were standing there, or you, just nobody, literally nobody, to them and to you, and but for them to walk up to you and thank you, that's a very
Means a lot.
it means a lot, of course. Oh geez, I stood there, with sweat in my eyes, a couple of times, and the as various people would come across the border, and but it was Benjamin Franklin said, God helps those who help themselves, and if you read between the lines on that, it basically means you don't really have to thank God for it because you helped yourself. You did the work, and so I kind of walk with that, um, before I start. I mean, if I won the lottery tomorrow, I don't think God did it. It's just a combination of numbers and all this, and the it would take something rather profound, and I don't even know. I would, so much so that I can't even imagine what it would be right now. It would take something profound for me to
It'd have to be.
accept and return back to faith.
It would have to be some kind of divine intervention on par with the experience you've already had at this point.
Something that I
Yeah.
in no way, shape, or form could even possibly offer
Another
a
explanation.
response to. Yeah,
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. It's one of those things that people maybe overthink sometimes, right?
Hmm.
And
Actually, I think a lot of people underthink things.
that happens a lot.
Hmm.
I think you can do both at the same time. When you're
Hmm.
overthinking something over here and not at
Yeah.
all thinking about this other thing that is completely related, but you haven't bridged that gap yet between point A and point
Hmm.
B.
Yeah.
And so it's been a while that you've been an atheist now, and how you
Hmm.
feeling about it now?
No different. It's kind of interesting, because the faithful talk about how good their life is, with God in their life, and they couldn't
Mm,
imagine life without it, and all this. I find it's kind of a non thing,
mm-hmm.
if that makes sense.
It doesn't come up.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, because what I find is that I don't have to make my world fit something.
There's an effort that you don't have to expend. There's an energy that you don't
Yeah,
have to use to try to rationalize the belief for something that maybe doesn't
for
fit.
something else that happens or whatever. Yeah, and so so to me, and this is just me personally,
Yeah.
um, I enjoy the fact that I can view things without having to make sure that the lens is in this row.
Right.
Looking at life, and and I found myself to be, dare I say, atheist on a lot of things.
Mm.
Um, and if that were actually a term for a lot of things, which it's really not, but I find myself to be a pure skeptic on everything. Um, the Somebody's got to prove some shit to me, and I don't identify as Republican or Democrat,
Hmm.
conservative or liberal, because of the fact that
They're
I
arbitrary
believe
labels.
I believe in no I believe in the existence of both, and that
Hmm.
they can coexist. You know, and the because because the only reason why those things become fights is when somebody tries to push beyond their own boundaries.
Mm. I see what you
And
mean.
I think somebody there was a great statement that somebody said, and I have no idea who to credit it to. But it was um, your rights end where mine begin, and
Yeah.
all this,
Your freedom to
which is
swing
a
your fist ends when it hits my face. Yeah.
yeah, and it's and of course there's the meme too. Religion is like having a big penis. The what do you call it? It's perfectly fine for you to be happy and proud of it and stuff like that until you start swinging it in my face.
Right, right,
And
right.
the I personally I enjoy watching groups be happy to get happy in their own little commune and all this of whatever they're doing, as long as they're not harming anybody. Who cares?
Hmm.
And but everybody wants to take such fucking offense to everything now and all this, like, churches won't marry gay people. They're not required to, so shut up. you know and all this. I mean, they're literally not required. It's not their club rules. Sorry. you know Excuse me. And
As long as there are other means for marriage and they're not going to
yeah,
make the
of
church a
course.
requirement, then yeah, I
Right.
see your point.
I mean, I mean, there are those hard views that people don't get. I mean, the same reason why. Well, I don't want to get too much into more recent things, but there's a lot of hard talks that people are afraid to have. They would rather sit there. They're comfortable bitching about it, you know, and they won't actually have the talks that need to be had from a rational standpoint. And so we get this whole feud of liberal versus conservative and all this other shit. And that's what I mean by it's beautiful to be atheist in that point, because I don't have to make one of those sides fit. I can actually understand both sides. You know, it's just that you need somebody in the
Yeah,
middle to
I've heard
finally say,
people
you got to
argue
sit down and talk.
completely. Yeah, I've heard people argue when it comes to the marriage thing. I've heard people argue, like religious people argue completely the other way and say marriage actually has nothing to do with the church. The church adopted it when
Mm-hmm.
as a matter of binding families together when the church was more of a in a political position of power. So it wasn't even something
Mm-hmm.
that the churches were originally doing to begin with. So if you want
Right.
to like talk about like who should be allowed to do what where, it's one of those like maybe the church shouldn't be doing marriages at all. And that's just
Mm-hmm.
something that happened after the fact, and it should be solely up to the state and the local government because
But
the reason
somewhere in
why gay
history,
people
somebody
want to get
yelled loud
married.
enough. Yeah.
Well, exactly. Like the reason why gay people want to be allowed to be married is because it comes with a lot of like rights and freedoms when it comes to like visiting your
And
significant other's
plus the
doctor
commitment to
or
each other and
next of
all those other
kin and
wonderful things.
right,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. But even just practically, it comes with laws and rules that involves taxes and yada yada
Yeah.
yada yada yada.
I
So
mean, yeah. But to put it in the most practical sense, when I hear things like that, what I hear is somebody walking into Burger King demanding a Big Mac.
Sure, like you're looking for the wrong thing in the wrong place, and you're starting a
It's
fight
it's
where
like
you
it's like
don't need to start a
what were you
fight.
hoping to win there?
Sure.
And I mean, they have their set of rules. Sorry if you don't like them, but they're
Mm-hmm.
not required to change to you. And
Mm-hmm.
so I mean, I see things like that, but I also, I believe in everybody should live the life that they want to, however they want to live it, as long as they're not harming anybody else. But they should also not try and impose their life that everybody else has to be cool with it, and it has to be,
Yeah,
So like I said, I
a
don't
bigger
agree
discussion.
with
Yeah.
everything has to be viewed from a certain angle.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
by the way, if
Yeah.
there's any conservatives who ever listen to this and they talk about the things that are going on in our country right now about people who are uh, the rise of conservatism again and all this, and I say again, look up the illustration from Puck back in the 1800s. Um, the rise of conservatism, basically all you're doing is saying that it's not enough that my country allows me to practice the religion that I want and live the religion that I want, but I need to make sure that the entire world around me is painted the same way.
Mm.
And that's stupid, selfish, and go fuck yourself. I mean,
That's fair.
you're allowed to be conservative because you live in a liberal country.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. You're allowed to be
You know,
conservative because you live in a liberal country. Otherwise, you wouldn't have a choice.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
because I mean there are plenty of examples around the world of countries that don't have that choice, and I just never. I guess those were some of the things that I just later on just solidified my mind. I was like,
Yeah.
you know, are, did this ever make sense to me? You know, so
Last question before we wrap up. Did any of this has any of this had like a major impact on like the way you live your life? Was there like any major changes that you had to make or had to deal with, or was it pretty like just a gradient adjustment?
I would say that I have been fortunate to live in a family that understands that the other people in our family can live the way they want to. Okay, I have a niece who's lesbian. I have a nephew who is transgender. Okay, I have I have pretty much the whole buffet of today's life in my extended family, and I have a rather extended family. The and I call it back to Dick Cheney. When Dick Cheney found out that I think it was a daughter of his or a niece of his or something like that turned out to be lesbian, he was like king conservative.
Yeah.
Um, you know, so I'm just it didn't really change my life in that sense because, like I said, my family was always kind of cool with you live to be happy,
Right.
and the but things that it did change. My Sundays are free. The and but I still I had I had one moment when I realized what religion actually was. I had one moment. I won't go into the long version of the story, but I will just say that I
Sure.
was dating a girl when right after I joined the military, and loved her a lot. And a circumstance happened with my flight when I was supposed to return back to my unit um, that ended up pushing it back a day. And my school best friend, my high school best friend, um, he basically came back into view. We just crossed paths along that same scenario there, and I decided I wasn't going to tell my girlfriend that I was staying in town for one more day. I wanted to hang out with him because I hadn't seen him in a very long time. And what do you call it? And there was a lot of things that he and I had to work out. And
Ah.
and well, anyway, she found out that I stayed there, and she felt very betrayed by the fact that I didn't let her know, and I ended up losing that relationship, and because of primarily that, and it was seen as a lie, a betrayal, and all this other stuff. But she was very deep in the church,
Mhm.
where I was not, but we were cool with that difference.
Yeah,
Because I didn't press
it
on
wasn't
her.
a belief difference. It was a attendance difference.
Well, kind of, yeah, community difference, and that
Yeah.
and that's one thing that I found out because I would say a couple of months later, I got the opportunity to come back down to Florida because I was stationed in Georgia at the time, and and come back down to Florida, and I couldn't get her to write me back letters. This is before email. I couldn't get her to write me back. Every time I called, I guess my number was known, so it was I was basically ignored and all that, and really hurt. And but I went back down to South Florida, and I knew what church she attended. It was one of those smaller but a little bit more modern churches. Had a band, that kind of stuff. And I went to I went to that church. Well, she wasn't there, um, just because of the day that I went, and she wasn't there. And then I got to talk. Her pastor was there, and I got to talking to him and stuff like that. And then we got to exchanging stories a little bit. Me being in the army and stuff like that. And he was just like, dangerous job and stuff like that. Keep yourself safe. I mean, give me all the positives. And I remember he asked me, just before I left, he asked me, do you mind if I say a prayer for you and all this, and I was like, okay, if you'd like to. And it was that that kind of hallmark moment, where pastor puts his hand on your head and stuff like that, and he's talking out to God and all this. And I I got emotional when he did that, and because it was the feeling of belonging, it was the feeling of somebody actually cares. This is a person I 5 minutes ago I didn't even know, and he actually cares about my existence and all this other stuff. And and I got emotional about it. And then we parted ways, and I got back in the car and started heading back home. And that was the moment that I realized what church was. That was the moment that I realized that it's not only about the Bible and fear of God and all this other stuff, but it's also communal. You know, that's what draws people to come back in. George Carlin made a big joke about everybody getting together and comparing clothing, but there is a community amongst those people, the feeling of belonging to that group.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And, so that was if you mix that with a promise of a afterlife and all this, that's some pretty powerful stuff.
And
You
self
know,
improvement and improvement of your relationships and things that you're struggling with being overcome with help
if
and
you want to go
friends
that
and
route,
people and yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so it was a very
It's tempting.
yeah. Well, I mean, it's like I said, it's some powerful stuff and all this if you play it right. And but I walked away from there, with just a little bit, that little bit more understanding of why I left that,
Yeah.
because I was like that's some influential shit.
You're
And
handing over a lot of power for people that you
mhm,
are only really tertiarily familiar with.
yeah, it's a lot of what do you call it, letting somebody have a lot of third party rule over your life,
Yeah.
and the
Yeah.
and it's not easy. So
Yeah.
yeah,
You
no,
give up a
that that
degree of
that was
freedom, I would say.
yeah. hmm But that was my journey into atheism.
Yeah.
I just I out of protection of my thought of God, my
Hmm.
teachings of God, I I couldn't accept that that matched reality.
Yeah.
You know, so yeah.
Fascinating. There's a lot to that. It's a lot to think about. It's a lot to unpack. I think you gave people a lot to think about.
Mhm.
If you guys want to go see more Sly and you want to see him bullying flat earthers, there's a link in the description. There's a link in the description. I will also link your channel in the live chat so people can hop on over there. What are you working on?
What am I working on?
Yeah.
Well, right now,
Gonna write a book?
as much as I started a book, um,
See, I know.
along almost these lines, mixing religion and flat Earth, and
Mm-hmm.
I haven't progressed very far on it though.
Books take
I
time.
have the outline written out, and I know exactly what I want to say in it. It's just that you got to sit there and actually punch that shit out and make it worth reading. Right, but
I have a sixth sense
um,
about these things.
but no, I mean, flat Earth is basically dead anyway now. All you got is trolls anyway. But I mean, after they went to Antarctica, it was pretty done.
Do you feel
The
good at having won? You guys
there
won.
was I don't see it as a win because it was never really
It's
a thing to
never.
lose, you know.
Yeah, fair
And
enough. Fair enough.
the problem you end up with is you end up with, similar to religion, you end up with a lot of people who boast about a third party belief,
Mm-hmm.
and the something that they were told to believe, something that some in some cases they were threatened to believe, um, instead of just walking a simple line of reality.
Yeah.
And
There
the
is one follow up question about if you've talked about Candace Owens being a flat earther.
Candace Owens.
Yeah, the right wing political pundit that used to work at the Daily Wire.
Oh, um,
I'm gonna take that as a
good for her.
no.
Good for her. Show me the proof. I'll just say it that way. Every time I tell somebody to prove something to me, that's not a deflection, that's not an insult, that's an invitation.
Ah, yes.
You know, I even stared Bob in the face. Me personally, I stared Bob in the face, the rapper,
Yep.
um, and because he was in here in Wiesbaden. Well, when I was up in Wiesbaden, I'm not in Wiesbaden anymore. But when I was up in Wiesbaden, I even stared him in the face and all this because he was a big proponent of flat Earth, and on top of that, he was a popular rap star. And I stared him in the face and I said, "When are you going to show proof of this?" And he was like, "Man, fuck you," and all this other stuff, and he walked away. And so I was, everyone, it's all good till you have to put it to practice, you know. And what do you call it? I pity anybody who follows it because to me that makes that just puts a neon sign over your head of how gullible you are.
Mm.
Um,
Makes you an easy mark.
and yeah, and I have a meme that I like to use a lot on Twitter. And it says, "Flat Earth ends the day that flat earthers point their standard of proof at themselves." And the and I challenge that to just about any belief, you know, because belief and truth are not always the same thing. I believe that the New York Giants are the greatest football team ever to walk the planet. But if you were to, but if you, because I do, I
Yeah.
am a Giant. I've been a Giant since I was a kid. But if you were to put that up against stats and stuff like that, obviously that belief is a little bit blown up.
Well, you
And
start asking questions of like, are you then, because you're part of the Giants, the best, as long as you're a part
mhm,
and signed on to the team? Or,
right.
yeah.
Well, because everybody has to believe that they're in the right. I mean, let's talk about Miss Canada here. Okay, the affected side of stupid politics right now,
Mm.
and it's easy for you to sit there and say that Canada is the right side of all of this or whatever. And I'm not in any way. I can't even begin to be as smart as I need to be about any of that discussion. But But the thing is it's easy to turn around and and pick sides. And what do you call it? Now you can base those sides on facts, or you can base those sides on
I live
emotion.
here.
Yeah, yeah. Just what for the same reason why I root for the German soccer team. So the
Yay!
but
Hey!
mm, but I mean, so belief, got to be careful with beliefs, and concentrate on facts. The world needs more facts. The world needs more people who are unapologetic with facts, not
Mhm.
unapologetic supporting something. And the I would close with that. I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. For anybody curious, the quote about swinging your arm until you hit somebody's face comes from John B. Finch, and I recommend checking that out. From 1882 is one of the earliest checks of that. If you're curious, I put a link down in the chat that you're welcome to go and check out if you're curious more about it. Thank you so much for joining us, Sly. I really appreciate you coming on and chatting with me about this a little bit more in a little bit more depth. And we're gonna get out of here. Like,
Sorry
share,
about that,
subscribe.
Toronto.
Sorry, not sorry.
Sorry, not
Sorry's
sorry.
our word. You're not allowed to say that. Have a good night, everybody.
Take off, eh?
Hey.